We are back. Now, Treasury, in its post-COVID-19 economic recovery strategy 2020-2022, now indicates that the country will have to appeal to rich organizations for either cheap credit or free grants to finance Kenya's budget. Now, the office, which has in the past pronounced its intention to move the country from expensive loans, now wants to avoid raising more debt from overseas capital markets. Now, the government was committed to bringing its burden for debt, which has risen to above 68% of the gross domestic product, to a more sustainable level. Treasury said in the paper, and I quote, a key measure of the ERS resource mobilization strategy is expanding and diversifying the donor base to include more concessional credit from bilateral and multilateral donors such as Green Climate Fund, Climate Investment Fund, Adaptation Fund, international philanthropic organizations, and other non-state actors, thereby increasing the share of grants and concessional financing into Kenya's total debt portfolio. Now, this comes at a time when Kenya's debt to GDP ratio has ballooned to 68%, with the taxman already recorded 65.5 billion shillings miss in the first few months of the financial year. This morning, I want us to look at exactly the debt that we have. Let's start with the data that we have for you there in terms of Kenya's external debt. We've broken with it up to where we are. It looks as if it'll continue increasing as well. Now, what about interest payments on external debt? And you will actually see that they have been increasing all the way from 2016 to 2020. George, do you think that this ERS, when it talks about the way in which we're going to manage COVID-19, presents a situation which is now the only way for Kenya, or just the best option? Which one do we go with?
Elijah, COVID-19 came to us at a very bad time.
Yes.
I remember our debt position as a country was already way up there. Remember, we are currently at around 68% of our GDP.
Yes.
In terms of debt to GDP ratio, and our total debt portfolio currently stands at 7.4 trillion. Remember, our sailing was increased this year, apparently, Elijah, to 9 trillion. So we are 1.6 trillion shy of our sailing. And I can bet you not that before the next budget cycle, Elijah, we might hit the 9 trillion debt. But COVID came in. And remember, in ESP1, that is the economic stimulus package that the president announced.
Yes.
in early March.
Yes.
He gave a lot of tax breaks to the citizenry, and those tax breaks had a ripple effect on the revenue collection by the Kenya Revenue Authority. For example, VAT was reduced from 16% to 14%. That 2 percentage point difference has made VAT to drop by almost 20p. That builds into the deficit that KRA posted in for the month ending September, 65.5 billion deficit. So I think Treasury has its work cut out. It is working at a point where its month-on-month debt repayment is increasing, yet its revenue collection on month is decreasing. So I think by Treasury thinking of going towards the grants and more of donor funding, maybe is the best way to go for now. It's not a very good thing for a country like ours, because remember, Elijah, we are a middle-income economy.
Yes.
And middle-income economies don't rely on donations, they don't rely on grants, but they need to rely more on trade. It's not a very good thing for the country. But maybe that is the only option that Treasury has for now. We might not be able to accommodate more debt into our books, Elijah. Therefore, it means that Treasury has only one option, that is concessional borrowing or grants or donations from its donors. The
Yes.
other thing that I would have expected Treasury to start thinking around is restructuring government so that its month-on-month recurrent expenditure is cut to the bare minimum. But I think in that front, I think the government has paid more of lip service than actual action to it. If you look at our month-on-month expenditure, almost 67% of our revenues go into recurrent expenditure, which is not sustainable in the long run. And if you look at the policies that the government is trying to put across, it points to even an increasing level of recurrent expenditure as we that's being pushed political class. It is going to increase the government's wage bill by a very big quantum.
Yes.
And that essentially tells you that most of our revenues still go towards the recurrent expenditure, not development expenditure. And where do you get the money to fund some of these huge expenditures if your revenues are not growing? It means that you have to continue borrowing. So at the end of it, we might find ourselves in a debt trap where we have to borrow from Paul to pay Peter and so forth. And that is not a very good thing for our country. Yatani came into office with very clear plans, but I guess COVID-19 messed his up and maybe has found himself in a position where he to firefight every single day. But as we stabilize, or as we go towards stabilization in the near future,
yes.
I think Yatani needs to first of all sit down with our debt holders, either to suspend repayments for some time, say a year, or to restructure some of these loans so that we can have at least some breaks in debt repayment as we start to consolidate our revenues. I think that's the way to go. But firefighting is not a good thing. It is something that the Treasury needs to plan and have action points on how they are going to address this our debt portfolio, other than waiting until the debt holders come knocking on us to make payments, yet we don't have the cash flows to make those payments like.
Pretty much, George, you and I are going to talk because now we do know his new plan. Again, is just to cut the budget deficit by 7.1 next year. Hopefully, we shall talk again before the end of the year. And then ask the question, is it possible? Because we do know what it was when he came in on our office. Things are not the way that he had expected them to be. George, thank you very much for taking your time to talk to us this morning, sir. You're quite invaluable, as we do know of it. Now, as the COVID-19 cases in the country continue to rise, all bars in the country will be now required to hire COVID-19 liaison officers to enforce COVID-19 protocols in the social spots that are deemed as hotspots for infections in the country. Now, the officers' duties will be to restrict the number of revelers allowed into the premises based on the Health Ministry guidelines and report any suspected case of COVID-19 infection among staff and drinkers under the regulations that are yet to be gazetted. Wow! The officers which the state will use to fill the much needed link between the state and the establishment will also ensure that those bar workers are there strictly to a yet to be developed COVID-19 code of conduct in a raft of stiff regulations for bars. Bars will also be required now to close dance floors and reduce contact between staff and drinkers, designate spacious waiting and collection areas for carriers and customers as part of curbing the spread of the coronavirus. This morning, to help us therefore understand this new regulation, we're joined by Mr. Mudhami Michael, Chairman of PERAC. Mr. Mudhami, let me just understand this. Is this a desperate move from the government in trying to manage the COVID-19 spread in the country? And do you consider clubs the new hotspots for infection?
Actually, I think there's been some miscommunication.
Yes.
That is not actually what happened. They released the actual guidelines, and the guidelines don't actually say that. The guidelines put 7 items that are the bar owner the responsibility under the guidelines.
Yes.
One is that you must belong to an alcoholic membership association. You must designate one sort of contact for every shift that you have to respond to any COVID-19. You have to request partakers to maintain the COVID rules within your bars.
Yes.
You have to ensure all the protocols are followed. You have to strictly prohibit the use of cameras and cordon them off.
Yes.
Strictly protect employees who have a higher risk. Any employees who are over 50, you give them other jobs that have nothing to do with having direct contact with the customers, and you COVID-19 among the employees to the relevant authorities.
Yes.
They didn't say go out and get someone, or they're going to give you someone who's like a security officer in your back. What they're doing is saying you have to assign someone, take them for some training of how to deal with the COVID-19,
Yes.
and that particular is going to be an officer between the multi-agency
Yes.
who are being set up between the county, the government, NACADA, whoever it's going to be, and us as business premises.
Mr. Mudami, are you confirming, therefore, that these regulations that the government was petitioned for just a couple of months ago have been printed and provided for you?
No, I think what was released to the press erroneously
Yes.
was some guidelines without going through the actual rules.
Yes.
We received the guidelines and the protocols yesterday morning.
Yes.
I have gone through that document from cover to cover, and no place within that document does it say that we are going to employ sort of a security officer to make sure that our premises are basically being loaded over by the government.
So are they saying that you get somebody within your workforce who can do that job?
Yes, actually, the actual document says assign.
Yes.
It doesn't employ.
Yes.
So basically, member of staff, maybe a supervisor or manager, give them on where everything is, how everything is supposed to go.
Yes.
And then their job is to liaison with be it the multi-agency, the government officials, even within your own organization.
Yes.
To make sure that you are COVID compliant, because that is the person basically holding the handbook within your organization.
Pretty much. Mr. Mudami, let me ask you as well, because then this is a talking point when it comes to managing COVID-19 in these social sports. How hard is it to just make sure that all these guidelines that the government is putting to you are maintained in these clubs? Is it near impossible, or are you going to say, well, it's possible?
No, it is possible to. I would say majority of our members, me personally as a director of PERAC,
yes,
are following these rules to the letter.
Yes.
We have gone to a great deal of pain, whether financial or loss of customers or having to increase our workforce to make sure that we are following and working within these guidelines
yes,
that we have been given. There might be one or two errant people
yes,
who, as the media has shown, people dancing and hugging each other in the nightclubs and doing whatever. But that is one or two errant members of our industry. Majority of the people in our industry are following the regulations as set by Ministry of Health.
Let me get this as well. Let's talk about the impact of some of these demands that you're told now to adjust to. That you have to go to the point of even closing dancing floors. Does that eliminate the reason as to why you'll have revelers in a club now?
I guess, to many people, it is to have more people in their premises or what. It's when you are facing bankruptcy or facing shutdown, it is very tempting.
Yes.
But also people look at themselves and see, at the end of the day, we are thinking about our lives.
Yes.
Because that same person can go, their child will meet in school or whatever can happen. They're also thinking about that. So as we are thinking about business and making money and moving forward, we also have to think about the lives of Kenyans. So I think we are trying as much as we can. We have now the new guidelines to the bar sector, which was covering the restaurant sector, the food-only sector. Now we have now for the bars and everything, which we are going to endeavor to fulfill to alas, especially now since we are going through what they are referring to as the second wave.
Pretty much, Mr. Mudami Michael, thank you very much for taking your time off your schedule to speak to Metropole TV, business I am this morning.
Thank you.
All right, on that note, that's exactly how we come to the end of the show. Get involved 20146 at Metropole TVKA across all your social media platforms. Good morning. See you shortly for news.